My name is Gabriela Hernandez and this is the video number 4 for Pasantías Pre-Profesionales y Vinculación con la Comunidad 2 for the second bimester. The topic of this class is the second condition. In this class, students will learn how to use the second conditional for talking about imaginary situations. For starting the class, students are given a worksheet. This worksheet have some samples. There are 3 paragraphs with people telling what could they do if they rule the world. It is an imaginary situation and students are going to read this carefully because they are going to answer questions later. They can read in silence, and also the teacher is going to read the samples aloud to the whole class. In these 3 paragraphs, we find the ideas or opinion of people that are saying what they could do if they rule the world. In this part of the class, the students are going to be introduced into the topic by watching and reading sentences that are related to the topic. For the next part, the students are going to answer questions about the reading for checking understanding. The teacher will write using the names that we can see in the worksheet. After that, the teachers will show to students the presentation about the structure of the second conditional. This is a poster that the teacher has to prepare in advance, and then she's going to stick it on the board. In the poster, we can find the structure for the second conditional, how to use the second conditional, and some samples using the different models that we use in the second conditional. Here, students are going to read together the teacher. They are going to read in silence, and the teacher is going to read aloud for the whole class. After the reading of the whole poster, the teacher is going to explain to students the structure, telling them what is the tense of the verbs used for the second conditional and the models that we use for the second conditional that are in the samples below. And also she is going to tell them that we use the second condition for imaginary situations in the present and the future. The second condition is for the second, present, and the future, and these have to be clearly set for students in the class. After the reading of these 2 parts, structure and usage, the teacher is going to read the samples and explain the scenario that involves the sentence. For example, in the first sentence of the samples, we have, if I won $1 million, I could buy a new car. Then here the teacher have to compare this sentence to the structure showed in the poster. And then students are going to relate the samples and the tense of the verbs to the second conditional formula. After reading all the samples, explaining the structures and more, the teacher is going to write 2 more samples on the board, and in these samples she is going to use ideas on her own, or maybe she can ask to students to tell any idea to write the samples. The important part here is that the teacher is going to use different color markers and to differentiate the parts of the structure in the second conditional. And then they are going to read the sample that teacher wrote on the board. And after that, we have the next part that students are going to be asked to read aloud the samples on the board. Any student can participate, or maybe the teacher can call names. For the next part, the teacher walk around the class asking for another samples and helping students to construct the sentences in the second conditional. And if the students cannot yet construct construct their own sentence, the teacher can ask them for the idea they have, and she can then tell the sentence, and the student has to repeat the sentence in order to set the knowledge. After this part, the students are going to write on their notebooks an imaginary situation. Any imaginary situation, maybe they can say to be a mermaid, if I can fly, or anything that is imaginary, or any wish they may have. And this is a part that the students, every student has to do on their notebooks. This is to be kept for the next activity. For the modeling part, the teacher will ask to any student the imaginary situation that they were asked to write before, and the teacher is going to construct a second conditional sentence using that imaginary situation. For example, in the case that any student says, if I could fly, the teacher could write a sentence saying, if I had wings, I could fly. Si tuviera alas, pudiera volar. In this part, we are going to use the translation method too, because sometimes the imaginary situations can be a little tricky. Then students need to understand what really are we talking about, and I think that is necessary for this part to use the translation method, but only in some samples that teacher think that that samples are some difficult to understand, not for the whole class. For the next activity, students will work on their own, following the steps that the teacher show, and writing the sentence in the second conditional using an imaginary situation. Then every student is going to use the imaginary situation they wrote before, and they are going to construct three sentences using the imaginary situation and changing the personal pronoun. Then students can ask the teacher, because the teacher has to be walking around answering questions and giving help to students to construct the sentences, or maybe to change the imaginary situation in order to help students to develop this activity. After this part, the teacher will write some other samples on the board and explain, while she explains the situation or imaginary situation that the sentence belongs to. After this part, the teacher can dismiss the class, and for this she is going to send students a homework. And for as homework, the students need to write 2 wishes or imaginary situations that they have in their mind, and then below each need, wish, or imaginary situation, they are going to write 2 sentences using the second conditional in order to apply the second conditional for an imaginary situation. This is the homework, and this is all the class for this time.